continue to feel fast-moving, demanding, and less if they can't quite put words to it. Help ease your mind and give you practical tools for navigating challenges. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Nasreen. We are already well into 2026, and many people I speak with are saying the same thing. Something feels different this year. Not necessarily bad, but more intense, faster, and a little less predictable. So today, I want to share a perspective that may help you feel more grounded and oriented as you move through the rest of this year. Recently, I listened to a talk by Yoko Tsuji, who is the president of the Japan Reiki Association. She's known in Japan as a very grounded, evidence-based individual, someone who didn't come from a dramatic spiritual background and who speaks very practically about energy, consciousness, and daily life. What she shared was her own perspective on what this year is asking of us, and more importantly, how to move through it without burning out, collapsing, or living in constant tension. What stood out to me is that what she described echoed something I've been hearing, not just from practitioners and therapists, but also from intuitive and spiritual communities around the world. I'm sharing her insight with you, not as something you need to believe and not as a prediction, but as one thoughtful perspective that may help ease your mind and give you practical tools for navigating challenges you may already be encountering. As always, I encourage you to use your own discernment. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. Nothing here is meant to override your own inner knowing. In this video, I'll walk you through what this year may feel like as it continues to unfold, what becomes especially important in 2026, and 3 practical ways to support yourself so you can stay steady, clear, and well-resourced. So let's talk about what this year actually feels like as it continues to unfold. As we move through the rest of 2026, one of the strongest themes Yoko spoke about is intensity at the practical, everyday level. And I want to be clear about what that means and what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that something terrible is about to happen. It doesn't mean we should live in fear or brace for disaster. What it does suggest is that life for many people may continue to feel fast-moving, demanding, and less forgiving of misalignment than before. Things that used to be manageable when we were tired, disconnected, or running on autopilot may start to feel harder to sustain. This can show up as feeling overwhelmed more quickly, less tolerance for noise, pressure, or constant urgency, a stronger reaction to environments, people, or situations that don't feel right. Many people are already experiencing this, even if they can't quite put words to it. Another theme she spoke about is what she described as a kind of sorting or divergence in how people orient themselves in life. Some people are choosing, consciously or unconsciously, to continue living primarily through external structures, productivity, material security, familiar roles, and old definitions of success. Others are finding that they simply can't live that way anymore. They're being pulled toward a more inner reference to life, one that prioritizes clarity, meaning, emotional honesty, and nervous system stability. This isn't about one path being better than the other, and it's not about separation in a dramatic sense. Yoko used the image of different schools of fish moving through the same ocean. They share the same space, but they're no longer moving in exactly the same direction. What this means in real life is that differences in values and pace may become more noticeable, especially in close relationships, partners, families, work environments, or shared living situations. You may find that conversations feel slightly off, that what used to be easy now requires more effort, or that certain dynamics naturally want to change. Again, this doesn't mean something is wrong. It means the year doesn't support forcing alignment where it no longer exists. What's interesting is that this pattern isn't being described from just one perspective. Whether people use the language of nervous system, energy, or consciousness, many are pointing to the same shift. One important point she made, and I think this is very reassuring, is that we are still sharing the same world. We are not disappearing into separate realities. We are learning how to move alongside one another with less friction, less forcing, and less emotional entanglement. So if you notice a stronger need for boundaries, a desire for quieter spaces, or a pull toward simplifying your life, that's not a failure to cope. It may simply be a very natural response to the way this year is structured. And that's really the key point. Not just what's happening this year, but how we meet it. So at some point, the question stops being what's happening this year and becomes how do I meet it well? Once you notice what this year feels like, the next question is what actually helped? According to Yoko, the most important skill in 2026 isn't pushing harder, figuring things out faster, or getting everything right. It's learning how to cultivate a quiet, high clarity inner state. She used the phrase a quiet, high purity frequency. And rather than thinking of that in abstract or spiritual terms, we can translate it very simply as clarity, calm, steadiness, and grounded presence. This is less about what you do and much more about the state you're operating from. Some people describe this through neuroscience and regulation. Others describe it as alignment. In spiritual language, it's often framed as a shift in consciousness. Different words, but the experience is remarkably similar. One of the interesting things she mentioned is that you don't need to see energy or auras to know when this is happening. You can often tell by the effects. People may say things like, you feel lighter lately. You seem calmer. It's easy to be around you. I feel relaxed when I talk to you. This isn't about trying to be positive or pleasant. It's more like nervous system hygiene combined with energetic clarity. When your system is regulated, other people can feel it. To describe this state, Yoko used a very Japanese image, being in a hot spring or onsen. If you've ever been in warm water long enough, you know the feeling. You finally exhale, your shoulders drop, your jaw unclenches, you're not guarding yourself anymore. That's the feeling she's pointing to. In everyday language, it's the opposite of bracing, defending, or staying tense just in case something goes wrong. It's a state of being open, relaxed, and unguarded, while still being fully present. And this becomes especially important if you find yourself in what you described as kind of a decision fog. If you're feeling uncertain about work, relationships, or your next step, her advice was very clear. Don't force big decisions from a dysregulated state. Instead, pause, but pause in a forward way. That means using that time not to overthink, but to stabilize your inner state first. When your system is calmer and clearer, decisions often become more obvious on their own. One of the simplest practices she suggested is something very accessible. Um, Sit quietly, no special posture, no complicated technique, and bring your attention to your breath and your heart rhythm. You don't need to change anything, just notice. Let things settle. This is essentially a mindfulness practice, and it can be done anywhere, in a chair, in a cafe, on a park bench, even during a break in your day. And if you'd like support with this, especially if doing it on your own feels difficult, this is where Reiki can be especially helpful. And if you've enjoyed the tone of my voice and the pace of this conversation, I'd like to gently suggest one of my Reiki meditations. They're designed to help you regulate your system, fill your cup, and allow your energy to flow more naturally without effort. I'll place a link in the description if you'd like to explore that. As we move through 2026, this kind of inner steadiness isn't a luxury. It's a form of self-care, resilience, and clarity. So, from that place, she offers three very grounded ways to actually live this year. They're simple, but they're not superficial. And when practiced consistently, they make a real difference. The first recommendation may sound surprising at first. Prioritize your own self interest. But this is not about being selfish, manipulative, or focused on winning. What she's pointing to is choosing from a place of what genuinely supports your well being, your calm, your clarity, your sense of inner alignment. In some spiritual frameworks, this is described as choosing a different lane or even a different timeline. I don't think of it dramatically. It's simply choosing regulation over reactivity again and again. This means making decisions that help you feel settled rather than strained. Noticing when you're doing things just to keep the peace or meet expectations. Gently stepping away from people pleasing or over explaining. In other words, letting your choices come from an inner yes instead of pressure. When your system feels more at ease, you naturally show up more clearly and kindly anyway. This isn't withdrawal, it's sustainability. The second recommendation is to be very mindful of fear. Not fear as an emotion, that's human, but the constant input of fear that surrounds us. News cycles, social media, messaging that subtly suggests something is wrong with you or that you're not doing enough. When fear becomes chronic, it dysregulates the nervous system. And from that state, everything feels harder. So the practice here is twofold. Notice when fear is being triggered from the outside and gently step out of the loop before it takes over. Yoko used the image of a washing machine. When fear spins, don't stay inside it. Step out and observe instead. This is where grounding practices are essential. If you feel anxious or scattered, don't try to think your way out of it. Bring yourself back into your body. Feel your feet on the floor. Slow your breathing. Place a hand on your chest or belly. Let your system settle before engaging again. This is also a beautiful place for a short grounding meditation or Reiki self-treatment, something that helps your energy come back into balance rather than staying pulled outward. The third recommendation is one that takes maturity, and it becomes increasingly important in 2026. Practice listening to people who think differently than you. This does not mean agreeing. It does not mean minimizing your values. And it does not mean tolerating harm. It means listening without immediately correcting, defending, or trying to change the other person. When we feel triggered by someone's beliefs, the body tightens. The tightening is information, and often underneath it is fear or self-protection. Instead of reacting, try curiosity. What led you to see it that way? What experience shaped that belief? Often, understanding the story behind a viewpoint softens the charge, even if you still disagree. This doesn't make you passive, it makes you regulated. And regulated people navigate difference with far less exhaustion and far more clarity. These three practices, choosing from inner alignment, stepping out of fear loops, and listening across differences, create a life that feels more spacious, even in an intense year. As we move through the rest of 2026, the invitation isn't to do more. It's to live from a steadier center. So to recap, this year may continue to feel intense on the surface. Inner clarity and calm become essential, not optional. And these three simple orientations can help you move through it with more ease. If there's one thing I'd like you to take away today, it's this. You don't need to have everything figured out to be okay. You just need a way to return to yourself. And often, those who feel a little more settled naturally find themselves holding space for others, not to lead, not to convince, but simply to steady. And this is where I'll say very clearly and from experience, Reiki is one of the most practical tools you can have. Not because it's mystical, but because it gives you the ability to regulate your system on demand by yourself, for yourself. When you can bring yourself back into balance anytime you need, life changes. Decisions become clearer. Fear has less grip, and you move through challenges with more trust in yourself. If you feel called to learn Reiki or deepen your practice, I invite you to explore that path. I'll share resources and links in the description. And if nothing else, take a few moments today to pause, breathe, and let your system settle. That alone is powerful. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next video. ありがとうございます。